Welcome to the Adventure Joe podcast, episode number 1. I'm honored to welcome our very first guest, John Guyant. John served our country as a senior executive CIA officer for over 40 years. John, thank you so much for your 40 years of service to our country. And again, I'm honored and humbled that you've given me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I'm really glad to be here today with you. Honored to be in your inaugural podcast. I think that it's going to be a really exciting set of series and episodes moving ahead. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of your stories. I know you've had quite the adventure, both in your personal and your professional life. So looking forward to that very much.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor again to share with you John Guyant and his extraordinary background and career at CIA. In the waning years of the Cold War, John began his CIA career as an intern from Indiana University. Go Hoosiers. He started as a contracting officer and eventually became involved in managing complex programs across the intelligence community, including billion-dollar spy satellite acquisitions. Serving across all the CIA's directorates, he supported numerous mission operations, including covert action and paramilitary training. As John took on additional leadership roles, John headed the CIA's recruitment and retention center at the peak of hiring after 9/11, and then CIA University, where he led the agency's training platforms for operational officers, analysts, technologists, and support personnel. John advanced into the executive ranks with a broad set of roles and responsibilities. At the National Reconnaissance Office, John served as the Director, Management Services, and Operations, where he spearheaded a strategic shift for increased mission resiliency during an increased risk environment. After time at the National Reconnaissance Office, John was asked to return to CIA in order to lead the agency's operational HR functions during the COVID period. I'm sure that was a challenge in itself. John concluded his career as Deputy Director of CIA for Support Management, where he oversaw the agency's critical global mission support organizations to include security, cover, medical, travel, logistics, facilities, HR, and finance. John traveled and served in over 34 countries over his career and led multiple change management initiatives after graduating from the CIA's inaugural Black Belt Six Sigma training. And he attended executive leadership training at both the Kellogg School of Business and at the John F. Kennedy School of Government. John's approach to training and speaking includes the use of compelling case studies, group exercises, and facilitated panels. Additional areas of expertise include risk assessment and management, leadership, strategy and vision, the role of aerospace and military partnership with intel missions, recruiting and training. Again, John headed up the recruitment center and then CIA University. Security, physical, technical, personal operations protection, and executive protection. The well-being of agency officers and operatives, including their physical and mental health. Organizational change and crisis management. Wow, John, what a career and background. Again, thank you so much for your service. And I'm honored to know you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe, and very humbled to think back on my early days at Indianapolis. Now, having had a career at the agency, never would have imagined all the opportunities and experiences that I would have been able to had. Just an absolute honor and blessing to have worked there. And again, appreciate you letting me join you here on this podcast.
Absolutely. But again, as we open up, it's my honor. I'm very humbled, so thank you again. Well, John, you ready to get into it?
Let's go at it.
Let's go. With all that covered, please share with our viewers your origin story, where you were born, raised, attended school, grade school, high school, college, and so forth.
Absolutely. So grew up on the south side of Indianapolis. It was terrific being able to grow up there, was able to walk to anything I wanted, school, church, store. Rode my Huffy bike around, thought I had a badass motorcycle, jumping over plywood and cinder block ramps. Never had anything too serious injury-wise, but made it to the emergency room a couple times. But, you know, that's what we did as kids, right? And had 2 sisters along with a brother, and the usual stuff, family outings, camping, sports, competition, a little bit of fighting here and there, but always a lot of fun. It was a terrific place to grow up. Went to St. Barnabas for grade school. Again, nearby, was able to walk to there. Developed a lot of friends there that ended up also being at the high school I went to, Ron Colley High School. I know you and your brother, John, my classmate John, was just a terrific guy to be able to know and hang out with there at Roncalli. And when I think back on my days at Roncalli, and I think you'd agree with this, Joe, the word I would use that best describes the place is spirit. There was such an enthusiasm in the teachers there, the students there, the athletic activities that were there. Football really began to blossom at Roncalli during our years there, and we could
Absolutely.
have a pep rally that I think would have triggered seismic activity on the counters out there. It was just a terrific place to be able to go to school.
Absolutely. It really was. I mean, I think, as you know, I got to play on the school's first state championship football team in 1986. And the pep rallies then, absolutely, they would have registered an earthquake. But again, the teachers, the coaches, and many of them were very instrumental in my life and during that period of my life we may go into later. But again, yeah, definitely great place to go to school and grow up.
Then ended up going on to Indiana University. Interestingly, my aforementioned siblings, they were all very good at science and math, not so much with me. I went to Indiana, they all went to Purdue. But I think I made the right decision. I ended up studying business management there, and they all did well, and I think it ended up working out well for me. Glad to go into the kind of the formation, if you will, of what took me from school into the next phases. But going to IU was just tremendous, and now, of course, being national champions in football is just an incredible experience to be able to live out, especially given the days when I was there at my years at Indiana. Seeing us win a national championship would have been almost impossible to ever dream about.
Well, John, in doing this interview just a couple days after the national championship, I'm actually surprised you even have a voice left.
It did go. I was able to join some folks at a watch party here in the area, a couple hundred people at a bar. So I'm drinking some hot liquid today in the same IU mug that I bought back my freshman year at Indiana. So hopefully my voice hangs in there for you.
Love it. Love it. Go Hoosiers.
Absolutely.
Let's get into the next question here, if that's okay with you. Share with viewers, when did you first become interested in working for CIA? And what's it like working at the CIA?
Sure, absolutely. Let me just step into my life a little bit, kind of earlier in terms of my interests. So I did not have, growing up, any real sense about the CIA, but I did have certain elements and interests in my life that I think did come into play later in my career and in my pursuits. So when I was young, very, very young, I was growing up at the end of the Apollo era, the space program. And I wanted to be an astronaut. Being able to be in space was just, to me, the coolest thing possible. Never got to do that, but working at the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO that you mentioned, I worked with, no kidding, rocket scientists and satellite engineers. Absolutely an incredible experience.
Hey, Johnny, you mind if I
Yeah,
interject
please.
real quick? Yeah, I don't know if viewers, really know much about the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office. I mean, people are aware of the CIA. Can you go into that a little bit too, which maybe you were going to?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Joe. Thanks for asking that. So if you think about what we call the intelligence community, it's several different government agencies that work together to try to solve hard intelligence problems. CIA probably being the best known of those. NRO maybe one of the least known. In fact, when I started working at the NRO, it was a classified secret to even refer to the NRO. It wasn't until the 90s that we came out of the shadows and could even actually acknowledge our existence. And its mission is to acquire, launch, and operate spy satellites. Satellites that hear, satellites that see, satellites that even can sense certain things that are happening. So seeing, think about imagery; hearing, think about signals; sensing, think about other measures that the United States might be interested in. The fact that we have spy satellites is unclassified. What we're able to do with those satellites, I'll leave to you and the listeners' and viewers' imagination.
Sure. I understand. I know viewers will as well. So pretty cool, though, because I know a lot of people probably aren't aware of that agency, but I can only imagine the amazing people you got to work with there as well.
It was absolutely incredible. I mean, I was able to see multiple satellite launches, One of the satellites that I had responsibility for in the program management, it was a one-of-a-kind satellite, incredible capabilities. I was actually able to have my signature placed on that satellite, and it orbited the Earth for many, many years. And it was really cool.
Wow, that is cool.
I had such a role that I was honored to be able to have my signature on that satellite in space.
John, as we continue, I can't wait for other viewers around that will see this interview, but hopefully the people from good old Southside Indy and St. Barnabas Roncalli can see what one of their own went on and did. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, there you go. A lot of credit to those who had that influence on us, right? Whether it's our family, teachers, coaches, classmates. You become formed by a lot of those early experiences and relationships. So that's a great point. So another interest I had was meteorology. I wanted to become a meteorologist, never pursued that, but interestingly, weather had an important role in my career later as well. I would head up crisis and emergency management situations. And so if there was a significant weather event somewhere that might result in needing to have some type of a response or preparedness, I had to be involved in that. So I think we'll get into preparedness in a little bit in this podcast. But the key is, of course, being ready for what might come so you don't have to panic at the last moment. Another area that had an interest in me was my father served in the Air Force. And so I've certainly had an interest in the military. I've had a strong interest in our national security, having grown up, again, back to those influencing values. So all those things kind of came together. In high school, I had a heavy interest in current events. Took a current events class at Roncalli, as a matter of fact. Very interested in what was going around in the world, politics, government, etc. Those things all continued to play out in my career. But I also had to save up some money to go to college. So I started working at McDonald's at the age of 15, became a assistant manager by the time I was 18, was involved in hiring and firing and the accounting and a lot of the business aspects of it. And that really piqued my interest in the business aspects of a job. And that led me to study business management at IU, which then would, again, have a big influence where I would go from there. So my sophomore year in college, I needed to get some experience. I needed to bring in even more money than McDonald's was going to be able to do for me. So I started applying for internships. So as a business major, you had the usual companies coming onto campus there at IU. One of them was IBM that was going to be there. And I was so prepared, Joe, for this interview, because this was IBM, which at the time, that was the place to go work for. And the office they had was in Boca Raton, Florida. And I mean, talk about the perfect thing that you'd like to go do an internship. A high school guy in South Florida, beach time, etc. I was so stoked, but unfortunately,
that was almost a no-brainer.
No-brainer at all. I mean, I could have been applying for any job in the world, and I knew I was going to go get it. But unfortunately, that morning, we got word that the person coming to do the interview from IBM had to do a last-second cancellation. I was really bummed. The student programs office says, well, we have another organization that still has some interview slots. Would you be interested in them? And I said, well, okay, sure, yeah, I need to get an internship, so let's see what we got here. And they said it was the CIA. It's like, CIA? What is CIA doing in Indiana interviewing business students? But that's really how it started. I did not have an ingoing interest for the CIA, but again, some of those formative interests that I had early in my life ended up playing out. So the position I applied for was a contracting officer. That's basically you're writing contracts, acquiring goods and services on behalf of the government. You need to know your law, you need to know how businesses work, etc. I won't bore you with that. But it got me that foot into the door at CIA. I kind of thought that the internship over a few semesters would help pay for college, give me some experience, and then I'd go interview somewhere else. But Joe, I'll tell you what, by the time I was getting close to graduation, I was absolutely in love with the CIA. I was in love with the mission. I was in love with the technology and the capabilities and the mission operations that we were involved in. Fortunately, I was not given a cart to go push binders around to pass out in offices. I was given a full SCI, Special Compartmented Information clearance, top secret, at the time I was an intern. I was actually being given real work and supporting real mission activities. And I absolutely loved the place and was very much looking forward to continuing at the CIA after my graduation. Also met a lovely young lady who was working there also, who became my wife. So lots of reasons for me to leave the good state of Indiana and come out here to Northern Virginia and begin a career at the CIA.
So kind of jokingly, you guys became the Mr. and Mrs. Smith from that movie.
Yeah, obviously, that's not who I look like. I'll give my wife maybe more credit on that. But yeah, it was fun. She was working at the CIA. And it's interesting, Joe, at the CIA, you don't come home and you can't talk about your work. It's a closed network there at the agency. So being able to talk with somebody, at the office and not worrying about bringing things home was definitely a nice added benefit as well.
It'd be kind of tough also. Not being able to talk about it at home because the level of responsibility and stress into that job. You like to be able to talk about it, but you can't. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
That's a good point, and glad to get into it at any point in this podcast you'd like. We recognized at the CIA a few years ago the importance of what we refer to as well-being, and I know that's become more popular elsewhere in other companies and organizations, the military, etc. But it is really important because when you have things going on at work that are issues, it's tough when you don't have an outlet at home to talk about it. But you know what else? It's also a challenge when you have difficulties at home that you can't talk as easily about at work. Because at work, it's hey, you've got the mission to do. Don't worry about your challenges outside of work. Just suck it up, buttercup, and get the job done. And we've really recognized in the last few years, if you really want to bring your best, if you want to optimize performance, you need to be able to take care of what's happening at work as well as what's taking place at home. So we've really been working on trying to help our officers through a lot of those type of challenges they face in life.
That's great to hear. And I think, a lot of people that, outsiders, right, when they look in, they look at people like yourself and that do that job, I think they think they're robots. And they're not. You're human beings. But when you add the extra layer of, again, that responsibility and stress, and you have something going on at home or with a child or parent, you guys aren't robots. You're prone to anxiety and depression, and especially with what you said might be working on. That could even add more onto it. So it's great to know and for people to hear that.
Absolutely, Joe. We have officers that are deployed 100, 200 days of the year away from their family, places they can't bring their family to. It's one thing if you're assigned to a European country and you have your family there, and that can be very nice. There may be some challenges there, but at least you have your family with you. When you have officers being deployed into some very difficult, dangerous places, and the family back home in the States is worried about you, and you're worried about your family that you're away from, that's an incredible stress. And you're so spot on, Joe, and it's worth foot stomping. These are real human beings, and I think we're doing better at recognizing that not that we're just trying to be nice to our officers or something, but again, back to recognizing if you're going to achieve mission, you've got to take care of your people. You might be able to really grind it out and kind of be robotic in a short period of time. That's just not sustainable.
Yeah, and kind of that, mental toughness, if you will, that only goes so far. Everyone has kind of, quote, a breaking point. But if you need your people to operate at their absolute best, they need to be, mentally as sharp as much as they do physically. So that's great to hear from you and viewers to hear from someone like yourself that served at the highest levels, that's a big part of the mission now for your officers and operators. So thank you for doing that as well.
Yeah, you asked about what it's like to work there.
Yeah.
We kind of tapped into a couple of those areas. It's interesting. The CIA has a lot of mythology out there, the movies, the TV shows. Some of them, frankly, are a little better than others. A lot of them are just plain entertaining, and we look at something that they're able to do, and we're like, wow, I wish we could do that. And then there's other things that you see out there, and you're like, oh, you have no idea. We're so far ahead of that. But it's interesting, a lot of how we're viewed out there. What it's like to work at the agency, first of all, it's tough to come to work at the agency. I look back at being hired. I don't know that I'd get hired today. We bring in some really sharp folks into the agency now, and it's frankly tough to get in. But I think the American people would want a high bar for the officers we bring in. For one thing, we have an incredibly large number of applications, as you would imagine, every year. I'd say we have pretty good branding. Doesn't mean everybody thinks highly of the CIA, but we've got good brand recognition out there. And so we get a good quantity of folks who want to apply. And a lot of the people we have bringing in now have incredible experience, have particular expertise in certain domain areas that are really able to be applied to some hard national security problems. In terms of some of the dynamics of working there, it's interesting. It can really vary. For one, we have dozens of different occupations at the CIA. So you might be a support officer or a lawyer. And believe it or not, we have lots of lawyers. We have analysts studying.
Probably an army of lawyers.
We have an army of lawyers. But I'll tell you, they come in very handy because when you're working in the gray area, you really need that guidance to kind of help you know where you can go and where you really can't go. So an analogy that's sometimes used is we are going to stay in bounds, but we're going to get some chalk on our cleats. And that's just how we have to be able to operate. So lawyers actually help us navigate a lot of that. Certainly we have the case officers who are recruiting people in other countries to commit espionage. And that's a reality. That's what we do. We're in the business of asking foreigners to bring secrets to us. A lot of times we are referred to as spies. Actually, we go out and we recruit the spies is what we do. But a lot of difference in the type of things you might be expected to do. Technologists, data analysts, cybersecurity professionals, satellite engineers, we talked about that. So what it's like to work at the agency can really depend on what your discipline is. But I'd say maybe one way to look at it, Joe, is both in terms of the headquarters environment and the field environment. Headquarters, there is a lot of structure, that organization, frankly, bureaucracy. More bureaucracy than a lot of us like, but sometimes you just have to have that machinery to keep things churning. And then in the field is where you're at that proverbial pointy end of the spear. That's where stuff is getting done. And the integration amongst all the officers in a field station is really something to behold. There's not a lot of people to begin with. I think people would be amazed at the number of people out there in the field, and it
probably a lot smaller than what people think.
I think it'd be a lot smaller than what maybe people think, but that means we have to work together as a team. It means you can't be all about yourself. It means that you're going to take on responsibilities that might not be your regular responsibilities, and things get done when you put the mission ahead of yourself. Frankly, those that have committed, our own officers that have committed espionage, there's almost always a common theme. It's about themselves. They have big egos. They are completely full of themselves. Those don't make good case officers, frankly. And so my point where I'm going with it is, in the field, there's just this tight-knit team that you bring people from various disciplines together to really get that mission done. But again, it can really vary depending on the role that you have. Headquarters, one of the positive aspects for sure about it is there's almost a combination of a company's headquarters and a academic institution. You have people who are very thoughtful about things in terms of how you approach solving a problem. You know that you need to bring in other people based on what they can bring to the problem to be solved. And so that ability to say, hey, I know somebody who works the Southeast Asia account. Let's bring in this analyst, or let's bring somebody in that is familiar with this cyber issue that's out there, and so on. Being able to have the right people accessible to you and think through how you might solve a problem is really, when it's working at its best, it's something to behold.
I can only imagine. I mean, a well-oiled machine, and our country needs it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think.
Now, I'll be honest, and maybe some folks that'll watch this podcast will have worked at the agency, and they'll say, "Yeah, I've seen a few times when that machinery had some grinding to it." I'll admit it. Absolutely, we're a large organization, and when you have bureaucracy, when you have different thoughts and approaches, there can be complications. But as long as the team is focused on the mission, then you're going to really be able to achieve things. And pursuing excellence has always been an important aspect of culture that I think cannot be overlooked. You have to have the mindset in the organization that we can do really hard things and that we're going to put our best at it and we're determined to solve it. If you have a mindset there that you're just showing up to collect a paycheck, if you're just of the mindset there of, okay, here's my start time, log on, and now here's the end time, I'm logging off, and so pay me for my day, that's not a culture that is really acceptable there. And it should not be acceptable there.
Sure. You know, kind of in that vein, John, and we'll move on, but, you know, because it's obviously over with and happened, but when you think about all the people that have to come together to make something work, you know, like the Bin Laden raid, you know, something like that. I mean, you know, it was the agency. Can you imagine the months and months of if everybody working together, right, and finding someone like that? And that's not the only one. So,
no,
yeah.
It's a great point, Joe.
I hope that was a good point.
It's a great point, because if you're watching a TV show or a movie, a problem presents itself. There's a few number of people that come together to fix it, and then it's over in a short period of time. And that's
a lot of moving parts.
That's exactly right. It takes a whole lot of people and incremental progress sometimes. Not the individual that's coming out to be the showstopper of everything. And so that's a great example. The time that it takes to try to develop the targeting leads, to work through various paths that sometimes turn into rabbit holes are just very challenging, time consuming, and takes a lot of really good people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I'm grateful for all of them. Next question. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Or is that?
No, I think that hits it. And I can certainly I can add into any of the other points you want to bring up or questions you want to ask, and we'll hit it from there.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, when they think about CIA, of course, are the movies. And again, one of your roles was in recruiting. Can you dispel the myths of the Hollywood version of the Jack Ryans and the Jason Bournes and the movie The Recruit and Sum of All Fears, and people latch onto that stuff. But again, what I want to do with you, and respect to our brave men and women that serve there, tell viewers, since you've been behind the curtain. I think I've heard that said in movies before. You've seen through the looking glass or whatever. I mean, the real talent that you guys have to recruit to do that job. I mean, critical thinkers and so I'm gonna let you take off. But if you can share with viewers what it's like to find and train those people.
Absolutely. So entertainment is fun. I love watching the shows and the movies and the flash and bang. In our world, if there's flash and bang, it means something went wrong. An operation that went well, nobody knows about, except in-house. And
let me stop you there real quick. Is good point. Is everybody knows about. I think it's good for people to know and realize too is the many things that you guys did to stop something from becoming bigger and maybe interrupting our way of life. But with that said, continue.
Absolutely. there's many, many examples of that I'm aware of. And then there's a lot that I'm not even aware of. But I became aware of a lot of them. In my job, my most recent job, I was receiving a version of the Presidential Daily Brief and would keep up on what we were on top of,
Fascinating.
what the threats were, what we were working. And there's just so much impressive action out there that very, very few people know about. And
John,
so,
can you spend a few seconds on that? Because I know people have heard about it, but the Presidential Daily Brief, and having been a part of that mechanism, can you share with viewers what you can, what that looks like? I mean, basically what you guys do is that goes to the president every single morning from around the world, correct?
That's exactly right. So it actually ties in real well with what we're trying to do at the agency, the kind of people we're bringing in, dispelling myths, et cetera. We're in the information business. We're not in the flash and bang business. We're in the information business. And in particular, we're in the business of informing policymakers on national security issues. And so the Presidential Daily Brief is a product that we provide to the President, the Vice President, National Security Council, Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War, other significant leaders in Washington. And we have folks that are working from the late afternoon into the evening, pulling information together, compiling and putting final intelligence together in the wee hours of the morning so that we have a product ready to go well before the sun rises that is brought with an analyst driven by one of our drivers to these individuals, these policy leaders. And if they're traveling, if the president is in another country, we're able to have it sent electronically, securely, and we have an analyst that's there with the president to be able to go over that PDB or other senior leaders as they're traveling. So whether it's bringing it to them, today we use tablets, laptops, depending on what the preference is, typically tablets. But if it's overseas, it'll be downloaded electronically. But those policymakers are getting the most, what we believe are the most critical pieces of intelligence to help them be prepared for either what's happening now or strategically. And so very important product for us. And I use the word product, but it's really the compilation of critical intelligence being gathered from our human sources, from our signals intelligence, our spy satellites, et cetera, being brought to bear. Sometimes our partners overseas, other countries are providing very important information for us. We pull all that together. So think of it like with your news feed. There's certain things that you're going to be looking for. We'll tailor that for the leader to make sure they're getting those pieces of information that are most important to them. And then again, it's not just the text, it's the analyst that is there with them to be able to address the issues and then take questions. And that's really where we, I believe, add our value, is we'll get asked a question. What do you think the likelihood of this is? Or what do you think would happen if X or Y were to happen? And we don't try to do crystal ball projections. We try to have a basis for what we think probabilities and likelihoods are based on the information we have, but with the appropriate caveats to say, here's some uncertainty here, or here is a variable that might come into play. Hope that helps a little bit on that PDB.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for going into that, because I know most viewers will have heard about that, or what goes, what directs any president, whoever's in office, about what they're going to do policy-wise. So very cool. I'm glad you touched on that for sure.
Absolutely. And again, that's the key. We're in the information business. We're not in, as I keep saying, the flash and bang business. We're in the business of having others provide us with secrets. A lot of times we're seen as the ones who are trying to steal the secrets ourselves. And sometimes, especially if there's some type of a technical approach, that may well be us. But from the spy versus spy, if you will, we're really asking others in different countries to help provide us information. And so back to a process that takes some time. When you're trying to recruit what we call an asset, that takes time. It's not like what you see in the movie where all of a sudden you just
overnight
have some type of deal with
Yeah.
made. You've got to assess, is this person going to have the right accesses? Can they be trusted? Are they going to be able to get you the information they need, that you need? And is it going to be reliable?
And that could take months or years.
Absolutely. It's like in life, Joe. It's about relationship building. And so getting to know somebody, getting to know their family, getting to know what their vulnerabilities are. What issues do they have at work? What do they think is important? You need to build those relationships over time. And yeah, certainly some things are really urgent. You got to try to find something out real fast. But in terms of long-term stream of intelligence, human sources, that can take some time to develop. And so you were asking about, what it means in terms of some of the training. Well, if it takes a long time to build a relationship, we need to make sure we take the time to train our officers on how to go do those relationships, right? We don't want somebody saying, oh, I've seen a movie. I know how to go to this conference or reception, and I know how to get somebody to come work for us and provide us secrets. You're not going to succeed. There's actual tradecraft to this art of espionage that does need to be taught, does need to be practiced. And I know we're going to get into a little bit of protection and things like that and preparedness. Some of that training comes into play there. How do you do an SDR, a surveillance detection route? We have you actually practice that and practice it and practice it. How do you make sure you know how to live out your cover? How do you stand up to the scrutiny today, especially with ubiquitous technical surveillance, cameras everywhere you go in the world now? How are you going to be able to not be identified in another country where that country has cameras tracking everybody all over the place? All the electronic identification that's out there now. Try to travel.
So a little different than what an operations or a field guy or woman would have been doing 50, 60 years ago, for sure.
That's a great point.
So they have to be really good.
You have to be really good, and the point I'm making of it takes some time often is because there's new elements that come into play, right? So there's some foundational pieces that we've been able to teach over the decades, but just like we're talking about right now, as adversaries' technologies come into play, we have to be able to adapt our tradecraft. If we're in the same mindset of, okay, I'm going to go to this country, I'm going to do a dead drop, they're going to pick up the bag, and then they're going to put some chalk mark on a pole, and then the next thing you know, we have got to be flexible, we've got to be agile, we've got to be current with our tradecraft to keep up with what our adversaries are doing. So back to your question, how are we training folks? Again, it depends on the occupation you're in, but for the case officers, we send them away for some very extensive training to help them be prepared so that when they're out there in the field, they can be safe, they can be secure, they can be effective. All these pieces come into play, and that's what we have to do with our extensive training.
Fascinating. It really is fascinating. I'll transition back to kind of the premises of the Adventure Joe podcast. And, some things that I've done is some private security work, executive protection work, and my own global travels. And, so this was kind of born from, friends, family, like, Joe, you should start a podcast and, talk about some of these topics, in the world we live. So, of course, I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to start with security. And, of course, you were the perfect person I wanted to reach out to start with that. So, but back to kind of the everyday people, talk about some general security, preparedness, because a lot of people that reach out to me, they're worried about right here in our hometown and going out downtown at night or so forth. And they've had no formal training. I've tried to preach it enough, but, I think it's better when they finally hear someone from you that's done it at CIA and done it globally and at the level you've done it. I know we talked a little bit offline, but you mentioned the 5 W's. If you can get into that, what those are, and I think that'd be a great area to touch on to the people that are listening and following that want to know about how just to protect themselves, their home, their family, even some business stuff. You go into those 5 W's that I know you guys also teach to a different level, with your operators. Go for it.
Absolutely, glad to do so. So preparedness really is such a key term. If you are reacting to something, it's just too late. You already have to have in mind how you are going to approach the environment that you're going to be walking in, driving in, whether it's in your local area or another country. You already need to be thinking ahead, and that's really critical. So on the W's, you're thinking about you're going to be, whether it's in another country or you're just going to head into town for some drinks and then dinner and maybe a show or something. Who might be in that area? Who might be there from a nefarious standpoint, but then also who might be there in terms of who might be able to help? What's near there? The next W, what's around you? What is going to be close by? If you need to get to a safe location, where would you go? Another W for you. So thinking about where you might be able to have, let's say you're in a conference. A lot of us are, as professionals, we attend conferences. What happens if something happened bad in that conference? Do you already know where the exits are? Do you already know where the stairwells are? Do you know where the stairwells take you out? What street? A lot of times we get people who think, hey, if something happens, I know how I'll react. Maybe they have certain preparedness or other conditions in their situation where they have a high level of confidence. But I'll tell you, Joe, and I'm sure you would speak to this as well, being the hero is not often what's called for. A lot of times a situation is knowing where to go so that you are what we call off the yak. What's that point in time where something looks like there's an escalating risk or a threat, that the best thing to do is to get out of a dangerous area? You look at some of these stories of nightclub, terrible scenarios that have happened, right? I don't think we need to go into details about what those are. People are familiar enough with them in the news. But unfortunately, a lot of people suffered harm. And the very best thing may well be is to get out of a situation, but you need to already be prepared to know where to go. And then another W is the why. Why might somebody be somewhere to cause harm? So if you're in another country, what's the risk there? Why would somebody be causing harm? In a lot of countries, it's going to be petty theft. It's going to be just some pickpockets or something. And you may want to be prepared to say, okay, I know where to put my valuables. I know how to keep looking around. You might go to other places in the world, and there may be people there that their why is to take out U.S. citizens. Are you familiar with what's happening in that country? Who is there and what their motives are? Motives being that why? What motivates some people to cause harm to Americans?
John, I'm going to interject real quick on that.
Please.
Keep your thought. But the travel, when I was doing a lot of my global travels, and it's a free public access, the CIA has something called the World Fact Book, right? And you can access, it's open source intelligence is what it's called. So stuff like that, citizens can look up, and I believe it's even on the website. There was a book published at bookstores. But that World Fact Book that the CIA publishes will tell you pretty much everything about that country, the crime, where to go, the politics, you name it. So sources like
Absolutely. That's right. So before you travel, do a little bit of internet searching. Go to understand what's happening in that country. Look at where there's actual threats. There's something called a heat map where you can look at where crime has higher incidences of crime. Go look at that. Now, to be clear, Joe, I'm not suggesting people be paranoid or even worse, that they can't feel like they can live their life.
Well, and that's not healthy.
That's not at all. That's not good at all. The key is back to preparedness. So go live your life, go travel, go get out to town. But those who are able to already be thinking ahead is what's going to be really important. Another area that I would throw out is I mentioned SDRs before, and even if you haven't actually practiced an SDR, a surveillance detection route, there's some principles that you can use there. And basically what a surveillance detection route is, you're moving along somewhere trying to detect if you're being followed, right? It's really that simple. And so if you either think you might be followed or you think you might be in an area that if you are being followed, bad things could happen, do an SDR of some sort. Be in a deliberate path to know if somebody is kind of following you in that path. Then take a random turn. Now, don't be obvious and, confrontational or anything like that, but stop in at a Starbucks or something and then kind of see what happens, because it might be natural that you would stop into a coffee shop somewhere.
Yeah, wow, did that person just follow me in as well?
Yeah, or they
and then repeat the process.
Exactly right. And then, just basic personal self-defense that comes into play. I recommend people take self-defense classes, not because they're going to go, inflict martial arts harm on somebody, but a lot of it has to do with the street smarts, the savvy of just simply being able to move around. So seeing what the environment is, knowing ahead of time what risks might be there, the who, what, when, where, whys of what might be around you. Seeing, as you're walking along, do you see anything that might be any type of a threat or just even somebody following you? Knowing where you'd go into a public area. Again, don't need a hero here. Don't need somebody going up and confronting somebody, especially in another country, because you'll probably lose in the courts in that case, right?
Especially in another country.
In another country, absolutely. So, don't need to be a hero. We have, we talk about in the agency, knowing when to get off the X. Now, a lot of times that might be in a real high threat, maybe even terrorist situation. But I think it applies in the personal world as well. If you're in a potentially dangerous situation, already knowing where will you go? Where would you go into a place of visibility, well lit, other people, police, fire department, something that already in advance, here's where to go to. Not from paranoia, from preparedness. And so I think that's really a key for people to consider. And then also being aware just of your own instincts. Sometimes that will tell you that maybe there's something that you ought to be aware of. So again, not paranoia, but informed preparedness. And that's kind of the physical aspects. If you're, again, going to town, riding a subway somewhere, being in another country, those are what I might call the physical threat preparedness. And then there's the whole other world of cyber threat preparedness that we can get into at some point as well.
Exactly. John, thank you so much for touching on all those. Yeah, I know that for my time working as a firearm instructor and executive protection work, private security, and I've preached those same things because, I care. I don't want to see people be victims. So sometimes it's better to hear from someone like you when people can kind of get a better idea of, again, the kind of level that you had to do it on. And again, since, we do care and it is out there, is just, and it's hard, like we say, it's kind of hard to stay switched on. It is, but, complacency kills. Complacency kills. Criminals, predators, they're looking for that person that is switched off and their head in their phone and they're not paying attention. They're in condition white. There's these color codes, white, yellow, like I say, kind of live in condition yellow, caution, but not paranoid. So again, thank you. But you literally just hit where I want to go. The cyber, and especially something I know that is a big interest to you. It's a big interest to a lot of people because we are now seeing it daily in our lives. We're seeing it in the news. And I know you had quite a bit of experience with it, kind of towards the end of your career at CIA. But I know something you're still on top of is artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to get into that. Cyber awareness, cyber preparedness is very important in our lives. So a lot of us now know about having strong passwords and so forth. So won't spend really time on that. But AI brings in a whole new world. And I can talk about some of the threats and preparedness there, but I'll also be glad to talk about what AI brings to the fight as well. But maybe starting on the preparedness side of things, it's interesting. I was in a conversation with my mom not so long ago, And she was talking about how she had heard that if somebody calls you, you want to make sure you don't say the word yes, because they can record that and then use it later, such as you agreed to open up an account or move money or something like that, and they would be able to play that you said the word yes, even if that wasn't the original format usage. And I was telling her, I said, yeah, but it's actually even worse than that now. And you can look at some of the tools that are out there that exist with image and video generation with AI tools. I won't name any of them. They're out there. People are probably playing with them that are watching this podcast. And that's at the very basic level. Think about what other countries are able to do. Basically, I describe them as countries that are essentially state mafias that are able to use even more advanced AI capability, not just to have a recording of your voice, but to completely manipulate it into a whole new persona of yourself. So if you use one of these tools out there and you just take a couple pictures of yourself and you say a few words into the camera, it can generate some crazy videos that look like that's really you doing whatever the script is for it, and it looks incredibly believable. Well, now take that back to the discussion I had with my mom, and somebody sends or calls or even sends a video to email that says, your son, John, is in trouble. And here's John, sharing, or it's just sounding like I'm calling her directly and saying, hey, Mom, I'm in trouble.
I've been kidnapped, or...
And then it sounds just like John, and it can become very believable. That's just one example that is out there. Certainly, a lot of the things that we become aware of with, messages coming in on our phone and email and so forth. But even more than this, that's kind of at the personal level that I would certainly say, just as we were talking about personal security preparedness, having a digital or cyber or AI preparedness is really important. But then from a national security standpoint, our adversaries are able to use AI in some very difficult things for us to counter. So everything from propaganda, you think about what a country might want to do with a social media feed that says, well, here's what I think, here's what this government official said or this celebrity said, and then the next thing you know, there's all these responses. Some of them are bots, some of them might be real people, but then all of a sudden people are getting stirred up and maybe stirred up into wanting to take some type of an action. That country that is looking to mess with us has just succeeded. They don't have to necessarily go in and do something in a straight line sabotage standpoint, but I'll get to sabotage in a moment, but they can a lot of times just mess with people using things like social media that was never really real to begin with, but people bought into it and thought it was. So frankly, I encourage people to use social media in a very sparing manner to begin with, but if you're on there on social media and you're flipping your finger up and down the phone looking at different things out there, you have got to be a discriminating user. You've got to question everything you look at to say, is this really true? And it's on both ends of political spectrum, by the way. You'll find things in there because they know our kind of our base instincts here. They go after what they think is going to get somebody agitated and motivated to take some particular type of action. So you'll get something in your thread and you'll be like, oh, I knew it. I knew that's what he said, or I knew that's what she was doing. And then all of a sudden there's this big thread out there that when you go and you just do a very simple research, like they never said that. They never did that. Somebody's just out there messing with us. But from a more significant standpoint, I am concerned, Joe, with what our adversaries are doing. And AI can be used in sabotage. There's, you call it either hybrid warfare or gray warfare, where you're not using kinetic strikes. You're not sending bombs in on a country, but you're doing cyber infiltration. You have the ability to take down systems. Think about our utilities that we rely on, our electrical grid. Think about our energy supply with oil that we're so much in need of, and being able to take those down even for just a short period of time. Look at what happened with COVID, how the world, grinded to a halt during COVID. If you have some type of a means to be able to take down a grid, other utilities, supply chain infiltration, being able to bring in false information, counterfeit parts, etc. These are things that could really have significant downstream effects. That's very important from a national security standpoint that we're staying on top of. Very critical there. Another thing is in the, if you will, kind of in the military space, where and this can be both an opportunity and a threat. In the past, as we have the use of drones and remotely guided sensors and capabilities, that used, to some extent, AI to be able to do what we call some point and targeting and all to help us know, hey, if X is in this location, now Y might be nearby or might happen next. Now you have the capability of having drones or other platforms that are instructed to simply look for something. They're not on a particular target path. They're just simply in a more of a broad surveillance path that if it sees a particular type of aircraft, let's say, as soon as it sees that aircraft, it knows to go take that out. And that's where a lot of things are advancing in the world of AI. But there's threats, and just like we were talking about with personal preparedness, I don't want us to become paranoid about AI either. I like to refer to AI as aggregated information. It's not some type of black magic or alien capability thinking or something. It's taking information that exists and aggregating.
Which I think some people think it is.
I think some people think it is. Some people.
You guys have reverse engineered. You guys have reverse engineered something.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people think. It helps with volume. It helps with speed. It helps with predictive capabilities. And then in the nefarious standpoint, it is able to then, if you will, replicate certain things or create things. Who knows where we're going to go in the movie industry in the future with some of the capabilities that are out there. It may be fascinating. It may be very disappointing. I don't know. But really, volume, speed, predictiveness, that's where it's coming into play. And in our world, it can actually add a lot of affordances. You talked about open source intelligence out there. There's so much information in the world now, of course, that human beings just simply can't keep up with that. But being able to use AI to
it changes so fast.
Yeah, to aggregate that information literally in seconds can be a powerful tool for us, not to replace analysts, but to do human-machine teaming, where that analyst knows they've got an intelligence problem that needs to be solved, and now they can use AI to more quickly pull together information that might have taken, a room full of analysts months to pull together. Now it can be done in a shorter period of time. Language, translation, cyber defense, even operational targeting, all have opportunities. Some of the areas I was working in where is computer programming. And this is going to be interesting, maybe for your viewers moving forward. If they have, let's say, kids and they're trying to think about what kind of majors do the kids go into or what kind of careers do they want to go after. Computer programming, that was the thing, right? Over the last couple decades, everybody needs to get into computer science, computer programming, etc. And there's still going to be a need for that. But we're looking at how do we use AI to actually now build code instead of having floors of computer programmers at desks. How to instead can use AI to help you with that. That's going to be a significant pivot, I think, in the job marketplace in the future. Business processes.
Absolutely.
Business processes. What we do, like any government agency, we got to adhere to the law. People may not think we have to, but we do. We have to have accountability, how money is being spent, and so forth. And so being able to use AI to more quickly and more accurately be able to do that, being able to find information more quickly. Think about us, we operate in the world of cables, kind of an old-fashioned term, think about State Department and moving information back and forth from the field to headquarters and all like that. But they're full of information about situations in countries, about our assets, highly protective, our most protected information. When you're talking about other people and their lives, that's our most protected information. But being able to use AI to quickly sort through decades of information sometimes, very powerful tool for us. So while there's some areas that are of concern for us, there's also a lot of opportunities as well.
Sure. Kind of the advantages and perils of it. I mean, everything has two sides of a coin, and it's just good to obviously be, informed. And so thanks a lot for doing that. And again, when we were going to touch on artificial intelligence, just to show how big it is, of course, I'll hold this up here as, there was a big, Time magazine special on it. So, I mean, it's everywhere. It's only going to grow, whether I think we like it or not. A quick thought on that was, and I'll share kind of a quick little funny story, is because you mentioned, where AI can hit, our infrastructure and so forth. Not long ago, I was sitting in a coffee shop having a cup of coffee, and the lights go in and out. And there was literally a guy sitting next to me, total stranger, I have no clue who the guy was. And, and we're all kind of looking around like, okay, well, power just went out. And he literally looks over and goes, I think North Korea just hit us. I mean, possible, not possible, but I mean, those are things that can happen. And we go back to preparedness. And like you said, is a lot of our, peer adversaries, I don't see them hitting us kinetically, because if they do, they know what that means. And people like yourself, right? Those back channels are going to start working quickly, but it's going to be, I think, the artificial intelligence and that cyber sabotage. And that's why people, part of this podcast is, to help our fellow men, so citizens, to be a little more prepared, because in here from you is it's real and it can happen. And we don't know if it can happen, today, tomorrow, or 6 months from now, but it's real. So have the basic preparedness and basic security in place. It's just good old fashioned common sense.
Absolutely, Joe. In fact, you bring to mind another area that I think is important for our viewers to pay attention to, and that's in the area of fraud, right? So I worry that we're going to have greater attacks on our banking system and so forth. So back to preparedness, I'm not recommending paranoia, where you keep all your money under the mattress and where you have a 30-day supply of dehydrated food. Maybe 1 week is plenty, but not, in all seriousness, knowing what you would do if there was some type of cyber activity with your accounts. Do you have backup paper copies to show when transactions took place? Are you smart about how you use your credit card, how you use your debit card? These are things that you want to make sure that you're out there practicing smartly, how to use your financial tools, how you're keeping track of your financial information, what you would do if there was some type of a dispute that may have been caused by a cyber activity. Now, hopefully, our banks are well prepared, both to prevent, but as well as to respond. But I'm only going to have so much faith in large organizations like that. I want to make sure I've got some level of credible backup of my information.
Yeah. John, fascinating stuff. Absolutely fat. Thank you so much for your insights on from where we started, to your background, to security, to the artificial intelligence. I'd like to move on to something that I know that, again, a lot of people see in the movies, they've seen in articles. I know, but it's very personal with you. But, it's that iconic memorial wall, right? It's in CIA headquarters, and there's stars on that wall. I know, those stars represent someone that lost their life in service to our country. I'm sure you probably knew some of those, maybe knew most. But can you share with viewers that iconic memorial wall that they've seen, movies have flashed it, and what that really means and represents?
Thanks for asking about that, Joe, because that really is important. We have 140 stars chiseled into the marble of the wall that you're referencing, the memorial wall that's in our front lobby coming into CIA headquarters. And they do represent the officers who died in the line of duty because they worked at the CIA and they were selfless. A lot of them are paramilitary officers that died. Others are in a variety of roles. And we know that we take risks as officers, whether that was in the Beirut bombing in 1983. I have a good friend, a commo officer, communications officer, who survived that attack, but unfortunately we lost several CIA officers in that too. We lost a couple of officers at our front gate, just simply coming into work when a terrorist brought out a long gun and started shooting as they were sitting there waiting for a light to turn, simply to come in to go to work. And so that is something that is very somber for us. Each year we have a memorial ceremony, and we've had a former director refer to that as the most important day at the agency, because we bring in family members of our fallen officers, and we read out the names of every single officer, even the ones who were undercover. We call out their names in a very solemn ceremony. And of course, the stars have the symbolism and the names in the book and the reading of the names. But behind each of those stars was a real human being, was a patriot who had a story to tell, family or friends or what have you. They had a life. And so we recognize that we're in the people business. And we recognize the people that are necessary to get our work done and put their lives on the line. I will tell you, if you go to CIA.gov, there is a section on there on the memorial wall. For a lot of the officers, it will not say their name, but there are examples provided on who some of those officers are. I'll share with you my last job at headquarters when I was working up on the 7th floor, you could say maybe our equivalent of the C-suite. I was able to park in a very limited area underneath where the director and his protective staff worked and a few of the other senior leaders, and I could take an elevator from that garage all the way up to the 7th floor and then go to my office. And after a while, I decided not to do that anymore. I ended up parking out front and walking into the front door. And the reason is, as you come into our lobby, you see the iconic seal on the floor that a lot of people have seen in the movies or TV shows. To your right, as you walk in, you see the memorial wall with the stars and a book with either the names or just simply a blank line if they were undercover. And then to the left, you see the quote from the Gospel of John, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." And so every day I had the privilege in this last job to be able to just walk right into that lobby and pause and just take a moment, or if it was at the end of the day, same thing, walk out and just take a brief moment and realize I'm not just getting a paycheck. I'm not just in a bunch of meetings during the day. What I'm doing is, I believe, important for our country, and the people I got to work with, absolute honor to be able to work with people and to know that some of them were willing to put their lives on the line for our nation and our allies overseas is truly humbling. And I'm not trying to be dramatic here. It's something that is terribly important to me. And so that ability to take that in every day, one of the greatest blessings I had being able to work for the CIA.
I can only imagine. Again, thank you. And thanks to your colleagues. Again, humbling. Thank you. Well, John, that time flew by. I mean, I know we can go on and on and on, but I really hope we can have you on again. Hopefully.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Well, in closing again, John, thank you again for your service. Thank you for being the inaugural interview on the Adventure Joe podcast, and I absolutely look forward to having you on for another segment sometime. Again, thank you for your service.
Appreciate it, Joe. Thanks for the kind remarks. And again, very glad to be on this first episode. And I'm looking forward to seeing more to come and hearing more from others as well as from yourself and all the adventures you've been a part of. So thanks so much, Joe. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Have a great day.